Okay, so this is Tuesday's class, but I forgot to set up Zoom, so I'm going to give a quick summary of what we did Tuesday. The first thing I talked about was what an investment conference is. This is an example of one from Goldman Sachs. It's a technology conference. Just want to show you the agenda. These things are really incredible. A lot of companies come in and speak. Just all over the place over several days. Here you can just see a lot of companies speaking throughout the day, many tracks going on at the same time. Some of these conferences are available for free, either on the website of the firm that provides it or on YouTube. COVID probably helped some with that because firms were doing things remotely because of COVID, and so they provided some of those for free on the internet. A lot of them are not free because they're doing this for their customers, and so you have to be a customer. So at the Goldman, I tried to sign up for the Goldman to get their webcam, but they asked me who my Goldman contact was, and so probably I could not have gotten in. I thought about putting a name in, but they would probably have checked against that. And that makes sense. This is their business. This is how they make money and get clients. So it's probably not going to be too many of them that are going to be available for free, but there are some. So sometimes it's worthwhile to at least search on YouTube, search in a Google search, and just see if there's some recordings of these. I have found some in the past. There was an energy conference by UPS in Houston that they had online. And there's other conferences that sometimes they'll invite students to go to. And then sometimes firms will do their presentation at a conference and then put that presentation on their website. So look around. You're looking for places where either the CFO or the CEO is making a formal presentation to investors. Those are usually very insightful topics of presentations. The second thing I talked about was the Helmer 7 Powers. You can see this webpage if you want to freeze the video so you can see the row page. But he does a good summary. Some of them are very similar to what we saw with the Porter's 5 Forces. Scale economies, that's part of the barriers to entry. Network effect, network economies, that's another barrier to entry. Counterpositioning is a unique one to him, and as that's a firm that has some process that is truly superior, but the incumbent can't do anything about it because they're too heavily invested in their current process. So he gives an example of Vanguard on the investment side, but there are some examples in the book given for that are very interesting. Switching costs, that's part of the buyer power of Porter's, but a very important one where it's extremely expensive for a user to switch to another provider because of the training. Branding is another one of those entry barriers or even rivalry within the industry. We talked about branding. I'm going to talk more about branding in this video. And in corner resources is a unique one to him. This is when you have some unique skill, some unique knowledge, or just talent. He talks about Pixar in that group, where you just have a group of people that are just the A team, the Olympic team. They have some skill, the 2 or 3 or 4 of them got together that can do something no one else can do, and you just maximize the value of that. And then process power is some type of superior process, something in the way the firm does something. It's just inherent to the firm. He talks about Toyota and their quality control process that has been very powerful for Toyota, and as well as being unique to the industry, although they had a few years there where they seemed to fall away from that, and they had to come back to it and reestablish it. So it's an interesting approach. Might give you some ideas on how to talk either about your industry or specifically about your company. We talked about the value chain management, and process could be a big part of that. Is there something unique about the process of the firm that gives it an advantage over its competitors? And then something else I ended up with was on brands. I have this article out there on Canvas. I'm not going to read it to you. I did go through it in class. But what I thought was really unique that could be really valuable is this part of it right here. Is this table. It's terribly out of date. It's a decade out of date. But these firms, Brand Finance, Interbrand, and Millward Brown, their websites provide a lot of free information on brand value. And so if you go to their website, you can look and see if you can find your company in the top 100 Interbrand has the top 100 on their side. I think all of them have, top 50, top 10, top 100. See if your firm is in that list. You might also, for paper one, see if 2 or 3 or 4 of the firms in your industry are on that list. You could even do a chart. We talked in class about doing a chart that shows the 3 or 4 companies, their brand value over time. I think UPS and FedEx was part of that grouping. So 2 or 3 companies in the same industry that really show themselves off in brand value. So remember what brand value is. It's the additional gross margin that a firm gets. So a higher price, they spend more to get that higher price, but they get a whole lot more in a premium price. Then they have to spend an extra cost. That gives them a greater gross margin. Brand value is essentially the present value of that superior gross margin over the entire infinity of the firm, however long it lasts. So this list has probably changed pretty dramatically since 2013. But these websites, they have their valuations. You may find very different valuations, but you can definitely quote them in your paper, find one that really works for your case, and say, according to Interbrand, 2 of the firms in my industry are in the top 50 when it comes to brand value. One of our students is doing Visa. We talked about Visa and MasterCard being in that list. So you can definitely go to these websites, find them, just Google them, and you should be able to find some really, really great information. Some of them actually, not only do they talk about or give you the list of their top value brands, they also have a short paragraph discussion about each of the companies. So that can give you some great insights, especially for paper 2. But on paper 1, where it really stands out is on that rivalry within the industry. Remember, on rivalry within the industry, what protects an industry from rivalry really killing the industry and having this kind of market share war is differentiation. If firms can differentiate themselves so they have their target market and they have that controlled, the industry is allowed to grow without there being this massive battle for market share, then brand value is how that differentiation is expressed. If firms are differentiated, they can distinguish themselves from the competition. They usually have a premium price, they usually have a greater gross margin, and as a result, they have brand value. So that's a really quick, short summary of what I did on Tuesday, because we spent most of the class with Jay presenting his draft paper, which was very, very good. He showed his draft paper. If you missed that and didn't get to see it, then find Jay, and he'd probably be willing to either send you his draft paper for you to look at, not the copy and paste obviously, but you to look at, or maybe and sit down and talk with him. He has a background in the industry that he's doing his analysis of, so he had great insights. He had some really great ways of organizing his paper. I think especially how he did rivalry within the industry to bring up those differentiations between different players in his industry. So I'll cut it there really short, but it gives you enough at least that you didn't miss too much by not having Zoom on Tuesday.
All right, so I forgot to record Tuesday, but I'll do like a summary of it for the YouTube, like a 20-minute version. So sorry about that. If y'all can remember, because like some of y'all are actually on Zoom, right? In here or not? So Derek, you got on sometimes, but yeah. So one student was like texting me and all that kind of stuff. I don't see any of that because my phone, I don't really notice it. So yeah, if I forget to get on, sorry about that. All right, so next Tuesday, I'm hoping to have 2 speakers by Zoom, give you a little bit of break so you can really focus on your paper 1. One is Jabari. So he starts his job as a security analyst this next year. He just finished an intern. He also sent me this job, so you might look at that. It's an opportunity at Rockefeller, which is where he's going to be. Good opportunity for someone either an investment side or a security analysis course. So this course is a good one. It really helped him in getting to that kind of position. So if you're interested in that, email me and I'll forward it over to you. It's a summer analyst, probably for next May. So be real similar to what we're doing here. So Jabari is the one. I'm trying to get Bensi as well. Bensi hasn't replied yet. Jabari said he'll be here on Tuesday. So if it's just Jabari, it'd be interesting to listen to him. But I want you to hear Jabari, who's just starting out, was in this class maybe last year or might be the year before last. I can't get my years, but pretty recent here. He's going for his master's, so it might have been 2 classes ago. And so this is what he's doing. I've seen him a couple of times. Some in New York, some in Chicago. So he's just starting out. And then Bensie's been doing this for a good several years and is at a really, really good firm now. So he'd give you the more seasoned person, so you can really understand this industry, this type of workload. It's very different than most other jobs that you can think of, um, mainly because of the autonomy of them. They're very, very autonomous jobs. You don't, it's not really obvious what to do every day, and you've got to figure out. It's kind of like your papers. You got to figure out what you're going to do every day, so you're not getting behind, wasting time, wasting effort. So if any of you are interested in that, let me know. I'll send it over. The other thing you might be interested in is the CFA Research Challenge. So if you're looking for something really, really great to put on your resume and you got some time, especially in the winter break, that's where really most of the time. So winter break and then through February. So if you're taking 26 hours next semester, it probably wouldn't work. But so this semester is not too bad because you won't even be able to start it until late November anyway. So most people, the workload's the winter break. We have one graduate student who already wants to do this, already have one team member. It's very much what you're doing in this class. They give you a company and do what you're doing in this class. Not quite as extensive though. So it doesn't have quite as many papers in it, but most do the same thing they do in this class, and you have to summarize it. So you have to have fewer papers to do it. UTSA has been one of the more successful colleges. We've had 6 teams make it to state and 4 teams make it to nationals. And then 2 years ago, our team won the state of Texas. That's the first time we've ever won. We've been the second place team a lot. We've never gotten past nationals. So we make it to nationals. At that point, I think it's a coin flip because, they got all these hundreds of teams, all with different judges. And some of the other come around and say, this is the best one, where the same judges haven't seen the same team. It's going to be a random thing. But it's a good experience. Even if you don't win, it's a good experience to go through. But you do have to have some time. So it takes some coordination. The teams that have won, they were here over the winter break, so it wasn't, there were a lot of traveling. I'm not doing my Costa Rica trip in January this year, so I'll be around. So if a team wants to get up here and use the Bloomberg machines or whatever, we have access to that. So think about it. I need to let this other person know. Usually the teams are 90% coming from this class. They're usually students that have just gone through this class because it's really helpful. It is a highly, highly regarded competition. They do have videos of, you can find videos of previous winners and see what they do. We do have previous papers. And the way it works is you do a research report just like you're doing here. That's submitted in paper. They pick certain teams from that to go present at state. And then state, they used to take 2 teams from state, and then now they just do 1 team. The year we went 2 years ago is all over Zoom. So they didn't even have it locally. So you present your team, and I listened in on the last one. I kind of knew they won after listening to them because it was down between them and Rice. And I could just tell from the judges' questions. They did a lot better in the morning. In the morning, I was like, man, they nailed it. That's great. I knew they were going to make it to the final 2. I was like, that was really, really good. They stumbled a little bit in the afternoon, but not nearly as much as Rice did. So they beat Rice. So I think UTSA may not be the #1 school in this competition. We're one of the top 2 or 3 as far as the number of times we've made it to the next round. So we've done pretty well. But if you're interested in it, they do have a website, CFA Institute Research Challenge. You can see that now. I think the negative on this is they're adamant. We're not actually the Texas region. We're the Southwest region, which is actually the second largest region in the entire globe. There's one region, I think, in India that's larger. So we're the second biggest, the biggest in the United States. But they're adamant that the company they're going to give the team, it has to be in our region. So the team that won two years ago, they got a company that was just not a good company. It was really hard to analyze. And that's part of the problem they have with the nationals. I think a lot of times the team that wins national, they just got lucky to get the right company. Because there's some companies you can do a whole lot more with than others. And sometimes you get stuck with kind of like our first team that won, they had rent a center. There's not much you can do with that's really sophisticated on rent a center. It's just not much there. So, but any of y'all think you might be interested, Luis?
I'm curious to know, does everybody have the same company in this?
In our region, everybody has the same company. And the reason they do, yeah, I don't know, especially with Zoom and everything else, but the reason they do that is you get to talk to the company. And so for some reason, I think they did because most of you travel to that city and listen to, but now you do it all by online. So I wish they would relieve that because they're really having trouble they're finding these really small companies that are really bizarre. The last one was just so bizarre because we took us quite a while just to figure out exactly what they did. So it's kind of frustrating. We've had like well, Bensi, if he comes, it was interesting in his group. He worked for Valero. So we're saying, well, it'd be kind of nice to get an energy company. Well, they got a refiner. It's like the company worked in. And then another team, one of our team members worked for Southwest Airlines. No, worked for Southwest Airlines. We got an airline. And so that gave him a huge advantage, especially on that team on the Q&A. They asked him about a merger or two, and he knew it. He knew it so low level. They were like blown away with his answers. So sometimes you get a little lucky on that, but yeah, rent a center is like, yeah, that's kind of boring. We got interesting enough, one team that won had GameStop. That was kind of interesting. Our very, very first team either ever was really, really good. And they made it to state. And then at state, because of their first team, they just got so nervous. Actually, Addison, who introduced them, he forgot his team members' names. And that tells you you're off to a bad start when you can't even remember your team members. So they just got so nervous. I thought they had a good shot of winning because driving up to Dallas, they were on the phone with me going through their presentation over and over again. And they had it perfect. And then they get there and they just got too nervous. But it's an experience. You put on your resume, you get some experience. It looks good that you're branching out. So let me know pretty quickly. There's not a deadline. I mean, a deadline is like November, so you got plenty of time. The real key is that you find the team. We can't have 20 people. We've got to have at least 3 people. So if we can't get a team, I got to go out and start finding people. Now, the team that won 2 years ago, that was probably the first team where I just went around and said, "Hey, you're going to be on the team," because I kind of knew the kind of people that would work well. There's some students that do really well in this class that competition is not their thing. You can kind of tell it takes a certain type of group dynamics to work. The last year's team, the group dynamics wasn't there. They were very kind of a team that just never saw each other or didn't know each other very well. So it just took a while for them to gel. But the team won 2 years ago. They knew each other really well. They're all in this class. And so they just immediately had a good product to go with. All right, so let me know on that. The other thing is the CFA exam itself. So have y'all heard of the CFA charter? So it's certified financial analyst. 3 parts. You can only take 1 part at a time. It's not like the CPA exam where you can take the entire thing at once. It's a hard exam. I have my CPA and I have the CFA, and the CPA was far easier by far. I probably studied 200 hours for the CPA. I probably studied 300 hours for each part of the CFA. So 900 hours versus 200 hours. So much more difficult exam. One thing I love about the CFA, I didn't like about the CPA, is I actually learned valuable stuff studying for the CFA. The CPA was just memorizing stuff I already knew and kind of stuff I didn't really need. So I got a lot out of the program. So it's a really good program. You can take part 1 as a college student. And that is, I have students asking me about doing their master's. CFA program will open up many more doors than your master's will. So, and you get the entire program, just getting part 1 done really opens up a lot of doors. Because they know what's the problem employers are having is that undergraduate and graduate schools, there's a lot of them becoming somewhat a little too Mickey Mouse. They're getting too, have y'all seen kind of those PhD programs in 6 months kind of things? Get your master's in a year. It's like, are you kidding me? What are you going to learn in 1 year and part-time? It's like, there's no way that's going to be a rigorous program. So companies are starting to question the quality of these programs because they're just kind of, they're degree mills, let's just get students in, get our money and get them out and give them a degree and they won't learn anything. The CFA program is rigorous enough that they know you must have some skills in finance. But part one of the exam is not that difficult. Part two is probably the hardest exam I've ever taken. Part two is a hard exam. Part one, most of it you've got in undergraduate schools. So most of it, a lot of it, already. I remember my part one, they asked the CAPM formula at least 10 times. And if you knew the parts, all you had to do, it was algebra. Sometimes I gave you these three numbers, you got to get the fourth, it's like, give me 20 more of those. Those are the easiest questions. So they asked, it's not that difficult an exam.
Do they offer modules to study also?
Yeah, so Juan Carlos is thinking about taking it. So we're gonna try to do a CFA exam kind of class in the investment society, 2 or 3 sessions to show you how to sign up, how to study. So you might look out for that. When I took it, it's very different now. When I took it, I actually had to take a trolley to the HR department, and it was a sack of books almost as tall as I was. It was 18 books, and some of them pretty thick, and it's pretty expensive because you have to buy the books. Now everything is online, kind of ebook kind of thing. It's still pretty expensive, but they do give you a list of what's in each section and what you should read, and you can plan it out. I think the secret for me was I focused on learning the material, not passing the exam. And so I read the articles, I read them again. If you take some of the review classes like Sweezer, their focus is on passing the exam, not learning the material. So I don't think that's of any value. So if you focus on learning material, you'll probably pass the exam. If you focus on passing the exam, then you use a lot of games and that kind of stuff. So I'm trying to find the level. So here's level 1, quick start guide, view level 1 details. So so the ethics that you haven't had before, you just have to read that part. Part 1, it's not too bad. Part 2 and part 3, there's a really special way to do the ethics I discovered, which is focus entirely on the case studies and ignore. I had the entire ethical thing memorized, but they didn't say write the ethical standards. They said, there's some of them, like Bob comes to work, he murders one of his peers, and then he does 2 other things, and okay, murder was wrong. And then the other 2, you have no idea what they are. So you have one that might be 1 and you do it twice, wording it slightly different. So you end up with 3. I just thought it was like, whoever wrote the question is like, they didn't make it really obvious. And then I discovered if you read the case studies, then you see what they're after. I had all the rules down, but I couldn't see. So, but on part 1's a little more straightforward on that. Quantitative methods is essentially a simple statistics class. So if you remember your F statistic and T-scores and those kind of things and standard deviation, that's in there. The economics is you got to use their economics. So that might be different once you had undergraduate. It kind of depends on your professor. But financial statement accounting, that's your accounting classes. You're prepared for that. The biggest thing there is make sure if you're given an income statement and a balance sheet, you can produce the cash flow statement. Have y'all done that in classes a few times? So that should be pretty straightforward. They didn't do that for me. I was ready for that. And instead, they just gave us a bunch of financials and said, fix the gap for what CFA is like. And so it was a little different. And I really messed up on one question because I finished the entire answer. And then I went to the next question and discovered what I just answered was actually the right answer for the second question. Then I had to go back and read the first question and figure out what they were actually asking. So it can be a little tricky. Then a lot of portfolio, but most of the portfolio stuff is on part 2. So the part 1 portfolio, if you took my principles of investment class, that's a lot of what that is. What's an alternative assets? What's a derivative? It's pretty basic. CAPM kind of stuff, bond valuation, very basic kind of stuff. It looks like my investment class, doesn't it? So it's definite readings they give you. The cost of it, I'm kind of surprised how expensive it is. So it can run up there, but we do have a scholarship at UTSA that we can get you. So if you want to apply for the scholarship, it's several $100s. It'll cover, a third of the cost or more. So yeah, you can definitely do that. If you do other review classes, you have to pay that for yourself. So Squeezer and some of the others can be up there in cost. If you're serious about security analysis, I can't think of anything better than part 1 of the exam. So I was talking to Juan Carlos. His concern is he gets part 1 and then he starts his job and he's working 60 hours a week. So you can't take part 2, and it's not a big deal. Your employer is going to understand that. You say, hey, I'm just working 2 long hours to study right now. They're not going to say, oh, you need to study 300 hours and work 60 hours. They're not going to say that. They're going to understand, and eventually you'll get the exam. So if you're interested in a CFA exam, maybe take the class with the Investment Society, see if it makes sense, look at the cost. And then if you're interested, sign up for the scholarship. We get 11 scholarships. We have plenty to give away. And then, start looking at it. If you're taking maybe 12 hours next semester, you could probably handle it. You probably need, I would say, 5 to 10 hours a week of studying starting around January. And what exams in February? He's probably starting in December. So 3 months, 5 to 10 hours, you probably, because you already know a lot of it, so it works pretty well. I had a mnemonic on part 2. It was 60 something letters long. I had this entire story. It was the performance standards. And I was just wishing they would say, write our performance standards, because I had the whole thing memorized. They did not ask a single question on the performance standards in any of the exams. It's like, and I had it memorized for part 3. I could still remember the mnemonic. I can't remember it now. I mean, it had an E in there somewhere, but yeah, I can't remember it now. But there is some memorization, but it's useful stuff. All right, any questions on that? All right, I want to go real quick through the outline for paper 1 one more time. And then talk a little bit about some of the example papers. So Jay did a great job introducing his. So last class we talked about brands, and those websites I think can be really valuable. So in paper 1, you have industry rivalry on reporters, and you saw how Jay did that differentiation. Brand value is a huge differentiator. So those websites I showed you could be a good way to produce something. So it might be something to say, hey, in transportation, 3 of the top 100 brands are, FedEx, UPS, and whoever else. And you can give me a chart of it. There's things you can do that could be really, really valuable from that standpoint. You want to do as much of it as you can under porters, but there are some things that you can do. Maybe in a section, you might call it innovations, you might call it recent trends, you might call it threats. If you can move it to porters, move to porters. But if you need those type of theories, you can. The history part, threats, trends, threats, opportunities, major products, major trends, that might work more before you get into porters to kind of set it up. The product life cycle is an important concept, maybe more for paper 2. I don't know if y'all have time to watch some YouTubes. There are some incredibly perfect YouTubes. I don't want to assign them to you, but oh, they're so good. This one right here in particular. Any of y'all, the Mamador, no, I cannot say his name. The Mortarin fans, y'all listen to his stuff. So he's got a lot of free stuff out here. Here he's talking about a corporate's life cycle. And essentially what he's saying, there's some firms that are teenagers, some are midlife, and some are senior citizens. And he says there's nothing more pathetic than a senior citizen trying to be a cool teenager. And there's nothing more boring than a teenager acting like a senior citizen. And he's talking about, what does it mean? So a young company with a lot of debt, that's a teenager acting like a senior citizen. But a senior citizen, a mature firm, that's a cash cow, trying to do something innovative like a young company, they're just gonna destroy the company. So he goes through that. He has some really good charts where he explains that. So he just shows you through, and he talks about what they should look like. And so essentially what he's trying to do is, so this is more like paper 2, but you might think about this in terms of your industry as well, because industries have cycles. What he talks about is what kind of characteristics do you see in here, because a lot of later stage firms, they don't like it that they're declining, and they'll do really stupid stuff to try to get them in a way that they just can't do. Every firm is going to eventually it's going to be over with. Their time has come. So you got startup, young growth, high growth, mature, stable, and decline. So idea, the business, I can't even read that. I don't know what that means. So he's moving through each one. He talks about each one. He does it kind of humorously. He has another one he does of this that I might like a little bit better. It shows him on a stage, a very distinctive stage. Here he has many of them. So you'll find this one's probably fine, but the one on the stage, he's a little more humorous and more entertaining. You'll see him. It's a really unique kind of a bluish stage, but I can't remember. So that's a really, really good one. Another one he does is the storytelling. Yeah, this Google one is perfect. This is really good. Have any of y'all seen this one? So this is a Google Talk, not a TED Talk, a Google Talk. So this is for paper 2. So essentially what he's saying here is when he teaches at New York Stern, he's got students that are very quantitative and they're horrible storytellers. And then you got great storytellers who are terrible at the quants. And he says, you gotta do both. So you can't just be running numbers all the time. You got to step back, say, what is this firm all about? And he gives several examples. What is Uber? Is Uber a rideshare? Is it a transportation company? Is it a mobility company? And so when he does his valuations, he says, I get this valuation. And someone else tells my valuation is much higher. He starts talking to him. He says, oh, you're not a mobility company. You're a logistics company, kind of like Robinson. Okay, that's a different model. What does that mean? What other revenue streams are going to have if they branch out from a mobility company to a logistics company? How do we get stuff from A to B, whether it's people or products? How do we manage that? It could be cars, it could be whatever there is, drones. So what does that mean? I think interesting for me for an Uber is right now Uber is a very capital light company. People are talking about Uber buying all these autonomous vehicles. Well, that's a very different model when they have no assets and now suddenly they're buying assets. So what is that model in the future with autonomous vehicles? He's trying to tell that story. What is this company? What does it mean? Like Ford, before the guy got fired, he changed Ford's name from automobile manufacturer to a mobility company. What does it mean for Ford to be a mobility company? Does that change the story for them in any way, or is it just a fancy way? Obviously, it didn't work too well because he got fired, but that's what he does. He talks about Ferrari in here. He talks about a few others. And he does what we're going to try really hard on paper 2 is try to get the essence of your company in 1 or 2 sentences. You can say what they're really, really all about. All right. I don't know, Jay, could you do that for your company yet? You probably could from your background. Could you in 2 sentences get the single most important? So I'm going to try to show you Costco with the limited SKU and how their CEO in just really in 1 sentence tells you everything you need to know about Costco. It's pretty impressive. So he does that here. It's a very good, entertaining. He's a very entertaining speaker. So one of the things he does with the story is figure out, can it even possibly make sense? So the example he gives, like I think at Netflix is the one he gives is, yeah, your assumptions ends up with Netflix with 14 billion customers. And the global population is not going to get much above 10. So how are you going to have more customers than the entire population? That's going to be a little tough. And the guy's like, okay, that's probably a little rough. Bigger than the total market. This is the thing going on with EVs. People were saying if you add up the value, if you look at all the EV companies together, their values, each one of them is as if they're going to get 100% of the market. So there's no way 10 companies are all going to get 100% of the market. But rather than the market saying one of them is going to win, we're just going to bet on all of them and their valuations. I mean, if you look at Tesla's valuations, they're more valuable than Ford, GM, Toyota, all added together. I mean, they're bigger than all the biggest ones added together. and yet they sell a fraction of the cars that those companies do. That's pretty unusual, right? So what's the market saying? EVs are going to take over. So what about these Chinese companies who are producing EVs? Can they possibly compete here? So if you have a company that's going to be more than the entire market, it's going to be an issue. None of you are doing Google or Meta. I think the mistake people make with Googles and Metas and those type of things is they look at this advertising budget growing really, really fast. But the problem is right now, Google and Meta's advertising is growing because people are cutting back on TV or cutting back on newspaper. But eventually, a firm has a limit how much they can advertise. You can't keep growing these things at 10, 15, 20% because they can't afford to advertise that much. Your profit margin is greater than 100%, so you have to have some costs. You have depreciation, but you don't have any CapEx. So these are things that are just bad modeling. And then the implausible, you're growing fast, but you don't have any CapEx. How in the world are you doing that? How can you grow so fast you don't have to invest in anything? That'd be a pretty nice model. Profits without any competition. So you're doing really well, and everybody's like, "Oh, well, that company's really good. I wish I could do that, but I'm not going to try." That's unlikely. Or you have great returns and there's no risk. You never lose money. So, and then the improbable, they're possible. Here's where these are very unlikely. This is when you're starting to get into something that could be an exciting idea. So it's low risk, but had a lot of reinvestment, high growth and low risk. That's unlikely. High growth with low reinvestment. That's really unlikely, but those are good stories. That, you can do one of those things. Those are good companies to invest in. And that's kind of what you're looking for. And then he talks some companies in here, but you can't tell. Yeah, I don't think he uses many more charts after that. But it's really good. It's very entertaining. I wish I could be that. Students complain, man, he's kind of monotone. Yeah, because I just don't. I get really excited, and this is it. This is my most excited. So sorry, this is the best I can do. All right. So there are things you can do that try to help you that there's some of those whatever his name is, in New York. He has some really good videos while you're exercising. Most of them you can listen to. You don't really need the charts. Give you some ideas of how to structure your paper. So he's like really good job. We didn't talk much on this. I really think this would go under buyer power. If you want to do an elasticity type of analysis. So how sensitive is the buyer to price? So the key there is how important is your product to the buyer's business? If you're 1% of the cost, are you 50% of the cost? So that's pretty important. And then how elastic is it? Are small price changes extremely material to your customers? So the more important your product is to their business, the more sensitive they're going to be to price, because small price changes is going to have a huge impact. The smaller percentage you are, the less impact that's going to have. And then pricing cycles. Obviously energy prices go through cycles. Where are you in that kind of pricing cycle? Do you want to talk? So under market rivalry, are you going to talk about the marketing strategy of your major companies? And that I don't really know. You talk to Jay with transportation. How do you find out about the transportation company? Do you have to go seek them out, or did they come to you? They know you were shipping, so they say, "Hey, Jay's shipping over here. Let's see if you take our business."
Generally speaking, because the brokerage was
So Robinson.
well,
And you know all the players, right? It's not like there's some major player out there you never heard of.
occasionally, like I said, local players you've never heard of.
Well, does Robinson advertise? Not on TV or anything, but do they send out sales reps to try to get business?
That's the thing. They really directly, I get tons of emails all the time from freight carriers. So they really hit people on the emails. Hey, basically, I know when they're hurting for their revenues, they really reach out constantly.
Do they have a sales?
We're here. They just kind of keep us on the bottom. Keep in mind.
Yeah, so this is something I think I don't have it in here really well, but it's customer acquisition. Might work better under paper too, but even here, how does this industry find and obtain its customers? So we talked a bit about Peloton. They have these shops, you can come in, test it out, try it out, see if you like it. That's pretty expensive model. Sometimes it's just advertising. Sometimes McDonald's, you just put the store there and that's all you need. But McDonald's does advertise quite a bit on TV, I would assume. So what is that customer acquisition? Like UPS, Claudia, have y'all thought about that, or Genesis? How do your firms? They probably have TV ads, right? But they also do a lot of business to business. I would imagine a FedEx and UPS have pretty long-term contracts with USA and UTSA kind of things. But how do they acquire those businesses? So they probably do have sales force. So, think through that kind of thing. All right, special accounting issues. You probably could ignore this for your industry, but there are a few places where it's pretty critical. So if you're doing a Boeing or any capital goods, I can't think of any of y'all doing major capital goods. So if you have something where it takes 10 years to make the product, you're going to need to talk about the revenue recognition process. What is that? How do they do it? What's the general rule for that? Are they heavy into master limited partnerships like the energy companies? Is currency a major issue? Don't talk about currency if they have 5% overseas sales. But if they have currencies is a major part of what they're doing, that's important. How heavy is the research and development? So this is what I was talking to, I think it was someone talking about this. I was hoping to show you tonight. I had it all set up and my Capital IQ account's not working tonight. I don't know when it works and when it doesn't. It seems random. But you can Capital IQ, you can definitely get CapEx, do it as percentage of revenues, bring in a bunch of companies and just show what that is, see how normal it is. If you're doing Nike, you can bring in the advertising dollars percentage. It's pretty amazing. Nike versus Adidas, they spend about the same percentage on marketing between each other. And you look at a few other firms, see how big is this? They're advertising 2% of revenues, 10%, 20%. That's an important thing to look at. Is it increasing? Is it pretty stable over time? And then what is the advertising? Is it online? Is it TV? Where do they spend that advertising? How did they get those customers? Is your industry heavy in the mergers and acquisitions? If not, ignore it. But if it is, now, do y'all know how to use in Bloomberg? There's the MA function. So if you do have an industry, a lot of mergers and acquisition, Bloomberg has a really good mergers and acquisition function. You can look up almost any. I think you can probably even look it up by industry, by year. There's a lot of things you can do that are pretty impressive. Inventory counting can be maybe important. Fair value counting, really not an issue. That's a big deal for insurance companies and banks, but you're not doing insurance companies and banks. That can be an issue. So think about it. What is that issue? Regulatory and legislative issues can generally fall under barriers to entry. So if you have a really heavy regulatory side, that tends to give the incumbents an advantage because they know that process. They already have experts there. They probably have lobbyists. A new firm, that's a really difficult thing to have to overcome. So that's pretty important. Do you think about legislative issues? When I'm trying to think of some with your companies. I mean, obviously California with EVs and requiring EVs. So I can't think. Can y'all think of any major national? The IRA might be an issue. So you might look at the IRA. So the IRA it's got a lot of green stuff in it, but it also has produced more semiconductors here in the United States. That has had somewhat of an impact. So look at those. Does your industry have a public relations issue? That might fit on a reporter, but that might be just one you have to do outside of reporters. So obviously ESG issues. If you have an industry that's polluting the world, that's kind of a critical one to maybe talk about. Semiconductors are heavy energy users. And so that's a big issue for them and their ESG issues. We're going to talk more ESG on paper 2. So, kind of broaden out your thinking. What are those things that your boss would want to know about this industry that not everybody's thinking about, but it's really important? It's got to be important. If it's not important, don't put it in there. but kind of broaden your thinking just in case you're missing something major. And then the Porter analysis. All right, so someone's asked me about the macro. They were writing their paper and they were going to do macro at the end. I don't want you to do that. Your macros should just be embedded in the paper. Most of your macro is probably going to be under buyer power or supplier power. That's really where it fits the best. So make it part of that. Jay did a great job with that and setting up his charts. So you want to make it look professional. So if I were you, you know, when you do your very first chart, spend a lot more time with it, because that's going to be the framework for most of the others, right? Get it exactly what you want to look like. Make sure you have good dates at the bottom that you can read, right? Don't do your Excel charts with, you know, 8 font, and then when you copy and paste it into Word, you can't even see the dates. All right, so build things up a little larger. Make sure you can see the y-axis. Have good titles. Make sure your source is in there. So spend some time getting that first chart absolutely perfect, and then it becomes a template for all the others. But on macro, the key on macro, what I look for is those 4 components: history, current, expected, and then tie it to the industry. How does it impact the industry? The other thing I'm looking is how closely tied it is. So the ones I don't like GDP. That's just too broad. Obviously, if a cyclical company, it's not going to do well in a recession, but that's too broad. I don't like inflation. I prefer you to go deeper, find a specific item like diesel prices. Find a specific thing, a specific CPI. Don't just say general inflation. That's just way too broad. Remember, under CPI and PPI, that the agencies collect incredible detail. It's kind of frustrating because when you bring up their site, it's just thousands and thousands of things, and it's really hard to find exactly what you're looking for. I might try to show you that site tonight. It's a frustrating site. Interest rates, I wouldn't do for any of y'all. Commodity prices, definitely, that works well. If your firm has a major commodity input, that's one definitely put on your supplier power. It makes a lot of sense. Labor can be a macro factor. If you have heavy skilled labor, there's a lot of charts on the shortage of skilled labor. Where are they coming from? If you're doing Chipotle, you could do a chart on minimum wage over time, and that could be a macro. And then how much is Chipotle's, or how much is a fast food's cost labor, and what has, as minimum wage goes up, what does that impact be? Mm-hmm. Yeah, I put all labor stuff under suppliers. Yeah. So minimum wage, probably not an issue for NVIDIA, but probably is a pretty big issue. And you might say, well, Chipotle doesn't pay minimum wage. They pay more than minimum wage. But if minimum wage goes up, everything above it goes up. And so it's pretty impactful. Demographics is a great one, especially on buyer power. You know, if your industry, so Louise, you're doing which company, Lilly? Lilly. So, yeah, I mean, if it's a product that's mainly the baby boomers, you can definitely find some good charts that shows the growth in baby boomers. So demographics are really one, and there's plenty of websites that have the kind of demographics that you'd be able to do. But get it as specific to your industry as you can. So yeah, drill down. Let me see if I can find that site again. So CPI data details by, let's see if that comes up. Yeah, this BLS is a really good one to use. So that's one thing about a federal government is they collect, I would say, I don't know if I can say billions, but they collect millions of pieces of data. It might be billions, who knows? And we're paying for it, so they got to give it back to us. They can't hide it. So this is all available. But just because they give it to us doesn't mean it has to be well organized. So it's the data finder. So it's under data finder. And then the search, this is where I found if you don't do the search just right, it doesn't come up. And let's see if I can remember how to do this. Let's try cotton. See if it comes up. I did something wrong one time. You have to have one button push. So you want it. So you got to make sure you take it. You saw I clicked that one thing off, and I don't know what I clicked off. So here's PPI, commodity data for farm products, raw cotton, not seasonally adjusted. Do you want it seasonally adjusted or not? I would say you probably don't need it because you're probably going to show annual data anyway. So that the most seasonally adjusted is going to be a yearly thing. So there it is. There's cotton prices back to 2021. Can you go further back? You probably can. I don't know. We can see how far it will let us go. So there it is, back to 1930. Wow, that's pretty impressive. It's pretty sideways. So community data, farm product, cotton, not seasonally adjusted. So I'm not an expert on cotton, so I don't know exactly what they're showing you here, but you have it. So let's see if I can figure out what I did wrong the first time. So I had this on consumer price index all urban. It wasn't in there. So you see when I see it says no data, and then when I click off of that, then the data came. All right. And that's what I was missing before. What? There's no cotton. So use cars. What then we have part? Well, I guess it can go back to 1953. It looks like the dates in there are the dates that are available. So there you see the COVID impact. A chart like this, I probably would convert to log normal. Just kind of depends. If it looks like you got a straight line to start, you might want to make it log normal so you can kind of see the indentation. So try to find something that you have. Someone give me what's the piece of data you would want. Let's see if we can find it. What companies are all doing? So let's do food. Let's try eating out, maybe. I don't know. Eating out of gaming, huh? Food away. Food from home. We'll see. Food away from home. All right, let's see. Doesn't go back that far, but that's probably okay. So yeah, there you got a pretty good chart. You have different ways you can express it. I think that's what it was already. So y'all think of another one? What company are you doing, Jose? I can't remember. Okay, so tile. Why am I getting hourly employees? Tile, that's tile employees. Yeah, I don't know what tiles. Well, we can see they would have that. They have furniture and household goods. So this is the problem: is it's thousands and thousands and thousands of pieces of information. You got to figure out how to put the right thing in there. All right, but it's there. So that's a good supplier power item to bring in. It's pretty easy to do, but you're trying to find something that's material to your product. So like for Chipotle, beef would probably be one. Ground beef, city average, 84. You can probably find Oprah Winfrey in there. Y'all remember the Oprah Winfrey thing? She did a show where she said something about beef and beef prices tumbled and they sued her. I forget exactly what she said, but that's probably in there. Maybe that's the Oprah Winfrey show right there. But anyway, there's beef profit. This is one I would probably do log normal as well because it just looks like one straight line. Holy, but boy, you see, is that COVID? That's kind of interesting. Why did beef prices jump so much? Oh, the one, it was in the news just recently. Let's look at eggs. Did y'all stop buying eggs? You think that one's going to stand out? Oh, you can already see it. Yeah, that kind of stand out. Did y'all stop buying them entirely, or you just And to me, it's such a small part of your, it's your grocery bill goes up $5. It's like a big deal. You don't really notice it, but I mean, that's a big jump right there.
There is, there is a feed store.
Hmm.
Who went crazy buying chickens.
Buying chickens, the razor.
Cheap, right? So it takes
Yeah,
6 months
yeah.
for you egg, right?
yeah, that's not a good. Well, in Costa Rica, we had egg farmers, and I remember one lady, she was asking us, should she add more chickens? And boy, she knew her market. It was pretty crazy. She probably fifth grade education, no business school, but she knew she was a businesswoman and she knew her business. It was pretty amazing. So, all right. So y'all see, I don't know if y'all want others there, but y'all got the website here, betabls.gov, and then just, I can't remember exactly how, but if you want to get the rest of that there, you can see it on the video as well. Data viewer dash view, time series, whatever, So this one's too specific, but so it's the bls.gov, and then just do the consumer price, and then just start drilling down as you go. Just start drilling down. I think I picked right here, visit page. You just keep looking until you find it, and you'll find this one. This is the one you're looking for, and then go to the data finder, and then click that thing off, and then start doing your searches, and you find a lot of stuff. All right. So one thing to remember about undergraduate, you got all this textbooky stuff. That's real fine and good, but your first job, one of the most important things you got to figure out is where is the data and how to get my hands on it. All right. So you got to be doing things like this. If you find a great source, let me know so we can let the rest of the class go. So where is that data? That's why I gave you Capital IQ and Bloomberg, because they got a lot of data you can dump into a spreadsheet pretty quickly. So where's the data? How to get my hands on it? So the nice thing here is we should be able to dump this into Excel. Let's make sure. I don't remember seeing that, but I'm just pretty sure. Let's see. Do y'all see a button? There it is. See it? It's XLS. And this new thing, I keep forgetting that button's up there. Where'd it go? Wait, where did my download go? Did I click it off? Okay. There you have it. Now, I don't know what price this is. Is that a dozen? $2.94, $2.09? This is the PPI, or was it? So make sure you know what you're actually presenting. I don't know what, I haven't bought a dozen eggs. I buy them in a little carton, so I don't even know what, I buy them already liquefied, so I don't know how much eggs cost. I have no clue. So they got up, pretty high there, 480 back down to 2 something. So yeah, you have it right there, and you can easily do your charts. So the other thing you got to do is figure out how you're going to organize your work. So the last thing you want to do is you have stuff just all over the place. So when you start the spreadsheet, start thinking about how am I organizing this. You're going to say egg inflation. So I've tried different ways where I have the egg inflation, and I do egg inflation chart. Or you do egg inflation, you have the chart up in row 1, so you can find it, whatever. You have to decide how you're going to organize that. But then the good thing you can do, though, is once you build your first chart, you can start copying over for other charts. The other thing you could do is you have a page that just says charts. We're going to see this when we do paper 3. So you create your egg chart, you number it, and so let's just do it. Can't spell blah, but blah, blah, blah. Make sure you have dates. I've had students give me charts like this. Always make sure you have dates. So go over and find the dates. And then be careful when you have dates, when they repeat, that they're not repeating. So just look down there. It looks like they're pretty good. This is one thing Bill Gates does really badly, is I wish they had a function where you could I want the last date to be my last date. Because they always do it from the beginning. And if my last date's 2023, I wanted to say 2023, and then I want to go backwards the other way. I haven't seen him. He doesn't let you do that. So it's kind of frustrating, but there you have it. And so then you build it, you perfect it, get everything you do, then you just cut it and you make it. You said figures, right? Figure 1. And you have it right there. And if you want to know where you got it, it's a little confusing, but if you know where you get it, you just do select data, and then you can see, oh, it's coming from big inflation page. So there's one approach. I don't know if y'all have Excel ideas, but start thinking now how you're going to use Excel, because you want to go in to your first job having it figured out how you're going to organize. A lot of students, it's like this random event every time they get into Excel, and it's an absolute mess. So start thinking about those type of things. Get the formatting down here. That's probably too many dates. Yeah, I didn't do that. Yeah, I forget where. Yeah, I don't like how he does starts, but anyway, that's probably too many dates. So probably spread it a little more. Sometimes you can spread it out to just making it larger. So again, make sure it's large enough so when you copy it and put it in your paper, it makes sense. So your very first chart, I would put it into Word, look at it with the 2 columns, make sure you can read it, everything's there. Once you have that perfect, then you can now copy this and use it for your next series of data and just change it. And now everything looks formatted, and you pick your color. So what color are you going to use? If y'all picked your color, green, I would be blue, definitely. Be consistent. So are you trying? I mean, it makes it look so, y'all saw Jay's look really professional. Then it's the same all the way through. That's exactly what you want. All right. Any questions on the macro? So we talk about here the link to your industry, the history, the current situation, and where you expect going forward. And then something related to what's the implications of all of this? Is this a major benefit, major harm, headwind, whatever to this industry? What's the issue here? Questions on that? All right, let me show you. I want to show you one of the papers. There's a lot of good stuff, and then some stuff I think he could have done a little differently. Don't tell him that if he's watching. So major products in the industry. Could you add any more with that? You could do it in a discussion, but if you do a table to say, if you have 5 different products, is there one that's the major growth drivers and the others are mature? Kind of think through those kind of things. Always is Costco, so that's a little different there. Total retail sales in the United States. That could be interesting. You certainly see the 2008. I don't know if y'all need a COVID section. COVID's a couple years back. When he wrote his paper, everybody had to do a COVID section because everybody was impacted by COVID. So yeah, you might have to do that.
Wait, what company was it? Costco?
This is Costco, yeah. With you, yeah, I mean, it's well, if you can, it's getting tougher because we haven't had a recession in so long. You're really talking 2008. We really haven't had an official recession since, well, 2020 was a recession, no question, but it wasn't a recession. It wasn't a normal recession. Probably the fastest, shortest recession we've ever had, ever. Well, it was big, but it was just real short. It was down and up. Yeah. Problem with 2008 was the more normal recession, and that's just so long ago. It's almost kind of ancient history. So it's a little tough. do you talk about 2008? I think where you talk, I'm sorry about COVID. I think where you talk about COVID is where it's radically changed stuff forever. So the DoorDash is much further along now than if we didn't have COVID. People just suddenly started buying food where they weren't before. Hello Fresh, that's just like suddenly people started doing those kind of things. Other things like at home bread makers, that's probably past. At home gardens, that was kind of a one-time thing, but COVID permanently changed. And Zoom, how many Zoom calls did you do in 2019? I never heard of Zoom in 2019. And then suddenly in 2020, I'm doing like one every 3 minutes. So yeah, has that permanently? Yeah, that probably has. We're still doing a lot more Zoom. So you talk about COVID, is it in office, offices, how people use real estate. So I don't know, Allison, if your industry, did you find I put the paper out there on the real estate. So if you're doing office, obviously COVID would be a big deal. That has radically changed things. People are much more comfortable working at home, but if you're doing apartments, may not as much. So COVID might be important if there was a permanent change. I think we're far enough away from COVID, you don't have to really talk about it. Whereas last year and 2 years ago, they had to talk about the impact of COVID. Well, if COVID has permanently changed the way people order, because a lot of people started ordering stuff for home because they didn't want to go to the store, and that may have been. I find myself, I'm at home and I need something. I get up to go get it and go, wait, what am I doing? And I sit home and I order it on Amazon. It's like and with Amazon, there's sometimes I get it that evening. Like, why am I going to drive all the way to Walmart? And I don't need it like right now. So yeah, that has hit my mind more. I don't know if COVID made me do that. I think that was just Amazon has gotten me to do that. So think about it. Have there been some permanent changes? You're probably going to have. I haven't thought about this before. Almost all of you are going to have some section on AI. I would think. Have y'all read stuff on your industry in AI? I imagine Robinson's using AI. I imagine Chipotle's probably using some AI on how to advertise, do any of y'all have an industry that absolutely is not using AI? Now, I know AI is looking for drugs. I don't know if you read some of those articles. I read the book by Henry Kissinger, and a lot of drugs, it's massive calculations. And it's scientists getting together and just randomly trying different things. And now AI can do that in a nanosecond. And it is amazing that they're finding new drugs now. So does anyone have an industry like AI is absolutely not being used in my industry? You think that's even possible? It's probably, so you probably will need a section. Now, can you put that in a reporter? I don't know. That's a little more difficult. So that might be on that innovation and trends. Everybody's using AI nowadays. He talks about the main competitors. I still don't like that approach. I prefer you do that more on a table if you can, but anyway. So how did he do here? I know, but you think I like that or don't like it? No, I do like that. No, it's real clear that rivalry is negative for the industry. So he doesn't say high or low. I hate high and low. It's negative for the industry. And he said it right there. He didn't make me read the whole thing and see where I'm going. So part of this is efficiency of your boss's time. You want them to know, all right, this section is negative for the industry, and they know that going in, so they're looking for it. It just saves them time. If they're sitting there reading, what's his opinion? What's his opinion? There's time where their brain's just trying to figure out what you're saying. Here, it's like, oh, and this industry's got a problem with rivalry. Okay, let me see what that is. You can do long quotes. I would be real careful when your quotes get too long. You're probably better off summarizing that. Look at it and see if it's really telling you something, or if there's really one or two pieces in there. Your boss hates reading stuff like that. It's like, why am I reading all that? You read Ibis World. You tell me in one sentence what they said. Don't just copy and paste the whole thing. So again, he's using the positive for industry. he's kind of focusing in on a few key providers. He's doing buying online. He's got that under revenue entrance. I guess that could make sense. So yeah, just buying online would count as a macro factor if you just look at the volume, but you need to do it over time. For it to be a macro factor, I need to see a change over time in some way. So online sales, so he's doing some stuff. E-commerce as a percentage of revenue, that could be a really good one. That's one that I'd be curious if COVID changes. So the COVID make it go like that, now it's back down on the longer term trend, or does a trend like this, COVID did this, and now it's below COVID, but a higher trend. Those are the kind of things you can show that you have the advantage to do that not necessarily be able to, well, I guess kind of like this chart, right? There's COVID, it's come down, but it's still higher than the trend, but it's been flat last few years. You know, those kind of things you're trying to give. Now, how would you grade this chart? Pretty bad, right? You can't even see what date that is. The other thing he did that you don't want to do, you don't want the month and the year. You don't want to be March 2020, March 2021, March 2023. Just do 2020, 2021, 2022, okay? Leave out superfluous information because it clouds things up. So it's way too small. He should have worked on that a little bit more to get it to fit. I'm okay with the Statista as your source like that. That's fine, but you know, have it so it's legible. Even these are a little bit hard to read. Now it might be that he copied this. I don't think he copied this one from Statista, but he might have copied this one from Statista, so he's kind of stuck. If you just can't get it to work, you might have to recreate the chart in Excel and try to make it so it just fits better in Word. But again, that's the main reason why you got to get those margins really thin, because these charts take up a lot of space. Yeah. Yeah, I'm not sure exactly what he's saying there, but that would be a macro factor. So he's kind of talking about, so buyer power, if you got a retailers, there's a lot of buyer power stuff you can do that's macro. It makes it pretty straightforward. Just, it seems like he's bargaining power suppliers, bargaining suppliers, buyers. Yeah, so here's a good chart. This is the kind of thing I'm hoping y'all would do. You have to decide what's important. So you kind of think what most defines this this industry. He could have done a lot better job with his titles. So he probably should have centered them, and you know, he could have shrunk this in. So he should have looked at it a little better to try to get it a little bit better formatted. But yeah, none of you, I'm surprised none of you are doing Costco, because Costco is usually a pretty popular firm, but it lends itself to kind of summarizing them. Average SKU items. So here you really see Costco versus the others. I mean, that's Amazon's a little unbelievable, but I don't know where you got that number. But anyway, 4,000 versus 100,000 versus 350 million. Look at that. He put the brand in here. That could be an interesting way to do it there as well. He did brand as percentage of market cap. That's kind of interesting, right? Did he think of that, or did he see that somewhere? So the more stuff you can do that's unique, that kind of gives you more bonus points with your boss. He did what I talked about, show consumer credit growth versus personal income growth. COVID messed up the personal income because of those stimulus checks. So you see these major jumps, but you can do that. He probably should have done a log normal on that one, but so you can create your own charts. So if you did retail sales, you look at retail sales and you say, wow, retail sales really jumped in 2022. That was a great year. And then you stop and think and say, well, wait, retail sales really weren't that strong in 2022. What happened in 2022? You had high inflation. Say, oh, you know what? I'm going to do retail sales. I'm going to do it net of inflation. So you bring in retail sales, you bring in CPI, and you do a new chart to show, hey, retail sales, once you take CPI out, really didn't grow all that fast. Those are the kind of things you're thinking. So you don't say, well, I thought 2022 was a bad year, but sales were up a bunch last year. Oh, I see the problem. So always think ahead of what is the chart? Is the chart telling you a story that's really true, or do you make some adjustments? Here he's talking about the generic forces. You can do it separately like this, or you can do it under industry rivalry. I think it fits better in industry rivalry. I really like the way Jay set that up. It makes a lot of sense there. So differentiation is really important to this industry. That keeps the rivalry limited because firms distinguish themselves from each other with these ways. There's no obvious cost leader, those kind of things. Or in this case, there probably is an obvious cost leader. And then make sure you have a conclusion. One thing he doesn't have, well, he has it here. I might lead with this, but I'm probably going to see all of y'all with this chart now. The question is, can one of y'all better this and give me something far superior? So what am I missing in this chart? All right. So never do what your professor says, do something better than your professor said. So you're teaching your professor, right? That's your goal. You're all smarter than I am, so you should be able to come up with something better than this. I mean, he almost perfectly exactly copied mine, didn't he? Even the same color coding. So, if you can think of something better, then that would be great. All right. Y'all have enough for paper one. Has anyone gotten their draft as far? Dante was pretty far along. Jay's pretty far along. If y'all want to meet with me this weekend, set up a Zoom. Saturday's a little rough because I have an EBA class Saturday, but Sunday evening or tomorrow afternoon, those times work. I don't know if I'll come to campus on Monday. If you ask me to come to campus, I will, but I can definitely do Zooms on Monday afternoon. So you tell me, we're what, 2 weeks out? 22nd, 14th, almost exactly 2 weeks out. So, this is a heavy weekend. You got to get this thing done. All right, I'll stop it there.